Hello, friends. This week, mm, well, first off, I'm filming it after 6 p.m. on Tuesday when I'm posting tomorrow morning. Clearly, things did not go precisely as planned this week. But that's okay. So instead of doing what I had planned on doing, I'm instead going to talk a bit about the body, spirit, mind connection, and how in folk magic and folk healing, those three are so intrinsically tied. And I'm going to share an experience of what happened this week as an explanation as to why it's been on my mind and why it felt so important to share this week. Those who have been paying attention and were looking at the thumbnail probably want to know the significance of the shoes to the mind, body, and spirit connection. It's because it's what brought my attention back to it this week. Because this pair of shoes are one of the last things my father bought me before his death. And he bought them for me as I'd been complaining about needing to buy new shoes, and I just kept putting it off. And so he went out of his way and bought me shoes, but they're not the type of shoes I would have bought myself. First off, they're slip-ons, which is fine, but I prefer having laces, because then I can adjust how tight they are based on how I am feeling on any given day. And even though he died in November, I still didn't go and replace the shoes. I kept wearing these. In the thumbnail, you'll see that there's now another 5 pairs of shoes. I'd previously owned the boots, but the other 4 I bought last week. Because I realized this pair, even though they're physically comfortable, were not comfortable spiritually or emotionally. Because I was still dealing with foot pain, ankle, knee, just leg pain in general. And I realized part of it is because I was walking someone else's path. I was walking in someone else's shoes. There are many traditions in folk healing that talk about the importance of your shoes and of walking your own path. When I studied with Katrina, one of the lessons was about the mind-body-spirit connection. And how if there is an issue with physical pain that has no discernible physical reason, often it's because there is some sort of emotion or spiritual reason for it. Which has very much been a case for me. Psychiatrists and counselors would call this a psychosomatic response. In folk healing, it's just the understanding that our mind affects our body affects our mind, our spirit affects both as well, and vice versa, because we're a connected being. So I was dealing with a fair amount of pain because I wasn't walking my path. I wasn't walking in my own shoes. So I went and I bought new shoes. And not all, but a significant portion of the pain has gone away just by that simple thing. This is not me recommending that you have to go and replace everything you own just because of an emotional connection. It was time. So I wanted to go through some of those physical aches and pains and connections that sometimes we need to evaluate. And it's so much easier to do this with a client rather than yourself, because we are never as good at looking at ourselves as we are as examining someone else. So one of the exercises that we did in the class was go through a list of common physical maladies, and what chakra they're associated with, and what could be a spiritual or an emotional reason to be having pain there when there's not, as I said previously, a physical reason, a more mundane reason that would make sense. For example, if your feet hurt after a long day standing on them all day, that makes sense, and typically that pain resolves itself quickly. It's if you keep waking up in the morning and they still hurt, but you've done everything you can, everything that makes sense physically to treat it. So I just wanted to go through some of the particularly pernicious and common issues in today's society, many of which I've experienced myself, and just quickly talk about some of the things that might be indicative of. So we've already started talking about feet, and how if you're not walking on your own path, if you feel like you are being manipulated or subjugated or coerced into doing things that you don't want to do, that can lead to a significant amount of leg pain. Usually either in the feet or the knees, because you are bending the knee to someone else's will. It can also often cause pain in the head, because it's the will being pushed and turned and manipulated. Some of the other things that I have noticed my clients and friends and family complain about: headaches. Particularly ones that are just hit out of nowhere, completely unexplainable. Not like a storm's coming in, just, when you deal with someone who's obnoxious and you just have a headache immediately? The crossing type of headache. A lot of times that has to do with our third eye. It has to do with, are we seeing the full picture? Or are we letting something essentially stick a moat? Stick something in our proverbial eye to block our vision and cause us pain. Sleep problems, which I've also been dealing with, are also often third eye related. Because when we sleep is when our mind processes all that we've experienced throughout the day. All that we've experienced. It's when we process our memories. And by extension, we process our emotions a lot in our sleep as well. Shoulder pain. This is one that confused me when I first heard about it. But when you think about it, which chakra is closest in line with our shoulders? It's our heart. It's our heart chakra. Which, as I started thinking about it and looking back on my life, I had an injury in high school where I dramatically injured this shoulder. That's why if I sit up straight, you can see that they're not quite the same height. But even though I healed physically from that wound, there have been times throughout my life where it just comes back, but I haven't done anything physical to make the wound worse again. Almost every time it's because there was some sort of strong emotional heartache. I had just lost a friendship, or someone close to me had died. These types of things take up residence in our body if we don't process them. And I will point out that it's more common for men to do this than women. Women are much better at discussing what they're feeling and letting it out of their body. As men in the United States, we rarely are either provided or take the opportunity to release the emotions that bother us. Instead, we tend to bury it somewhere in our body. A lot of men end up burying it either in their forearms or in their back. And if you know a massage therapist, you can typically ask, and they'll be able to tell you, oh yeah, this person was having this kind of problem. That has nothing to do with their body, but it's where they've been storing the emotion. For me, I end up storing a lot of the negative emotions in my forearms because I will clench rather than say what needed said. And then that sits and buries and stays there until you actually work it out. One of the reasons men do a lot of physical activity when they're trying to mentally process something is because then they're putting the emotion out of their body. They're putting it into whatever they're working on. So they're releasing it through working out, through woodworking, through the gardening, the mechanic, by doing something physical. Women tend to do this much better by just talking to people. Although, I will admit, I have seen quite a few women release their emotions by beating up their bread dough. That is also something that happens. This is not a exclusively one or the other thing. There is overlap. I'm talking in generalities here. Some of these other things, like one of the ones that I've also noticed in myself, I have a fair number of allergies, which are autoimmune responses. If I am not taking care of my spiritual health, they get worse. If I'm not keeping my physical environment, not just physically clean, but also spiritually clean, they get worse. Because we are an integrated body. I know this is kind of rambling at this point. More than anything in folk healing, we're looking to find not necessarily the reason or the explanation, but what will help our client. What will encourage them? What will assist them in letting go of that which is causing illness or disease? Or, as I'm sure many of you have heard before, dis-ease. Something that is making us uncomfortable. So these are the things that have just kind of been puttering around in my brain this week. And that being said, as soon as this video is over, these are going in the trash because that portion of my life is over. I'm no longer walking that path. I'm walking a new path. And so I've equipped myself with new shoes. Shoes that much better reflect my state of being. Reflect who I am. Ones that are a bit more colorful. Have a bit more personality to them. what's been fascinating is the more I have embraced walking my own path, the more I have embraced the me that I am when I am alone, the more I start wearing things like this shirt, like this necklace, the things that show a personality beyond the business person, beyond the employee, beyond other people's expectations. And the more I do it, the happier I am. So there's some ramblings for some practical magic for you about the mind, body, spirit connection. Until next time, walk in the light, my friends.